From KVUE News in Austin, you're watching Texas This Week with Ashley Goodo.
This week, the Senate Committee on Business and Commerce voted out SB 1264, legislation to make sure Texans on state-regulated insurance plans never get hit with surprise medical bills again. Instead, it would force insurance companies and providers into arbitration. The author of the bill, Senator Kelly Hancock, stopped by to talk about it. Senator, thank you for being with us this morning.
Absolutely.
You have been working on surprise medical bill legislation for a decade now.
For a little over a decade,
right.
Yeah.
How did you first get interested, find out about this?
Well, actually, I was running for office, and I had a constituent, a friend of mine at church, had an operation, got surgery, met his copay, paid his deductible, thought he was done, and then all of a sudden he had a $2,500 bill that showed up in the mail, and he was not happy, obviously. And so he asked me to do something about it, and so I got elected, came down, and almost immediately was told, you'll never do that. People have been trying to fix that for years, and of course that was exactly all I needed to say, all right, well, watch me. And so yeah, it's been 10 years. We passed our first bill 10 years ago to deal with it, and it was a little bit smaller, and we had to kind of get used to it, and then it kept growing and adding, and finally this last week we passed out of the committee in the Senate, Business and Commerce Committee in the Senate. We passed out a much more comprehensive that will essentially eliminate surprise medical bills, balance of billing for those with state regulated plans, and so we're almost there.
So tell us a little bit, for people who aren't familiar with the bill, what exactly does it do?
Well, number one, you understand we use the concept balance billing, surprise medical bills, and what it is when you think that your insurance company has covered everything, that you've paid your deductible, you've paid your copay, and then the provider or that physician, a bill shows up in the mail, and it's a surprise to you. And what happens is the insurance company has paid the provider or the physician, but apparently not sufficient. And so then they come to the patient to pay the balance. And what this bill does is essentially say you don't get to use the patient as a pawn in this game. If you don't think you were paid enough with the insurance company, then we established first a phone call that takes the patient out of it, and initially the patient had to initiate this, and with patient initiation we saved $30 million for patients across the state of Texas. This doesn't require the patient to be involved at all, and so if the provider doesn't feel like they were compensated fairly, then they can simply request arbitration. It starts with a phone call. Historically, 95% of this has been worked out with a simple phone call between the insurance company and the provider. If that doesn't work, then it goes to what we call a baseball-style arbitration, which is you look at what was paid, a reimbursement by the insurance company, and then what was billed by the doctor by the provider, and then the arbitrator will sit there and determine which one is closer to the right number, and which one is actually closer actually wins the arbitration.
When we look at how the bill is moving through the process, you mentioned that it got voted out of committee. Congratulations, that is a very big deal for the bills. However, a Republican senator from actually our area, Senator Donna Campbell, she's an ER doctor, and she voted against the bill. She feels like this helps insurance companies opposed to helping providers, doctors. So what do you say to that line of thought, that reasoning?
Well, I think the baseball-style arbitration, what it does is it forces both parties to the middle. And so let's take, for example, if the insurance company lowballs the reimbursement, then that actually is going to work against them in this baseball-style arbitration, where the arbitrator says, well, here's what we believe is appropriate. Whoever's closest to that appropriate number actually wins the arbitration. So if you're going to lowball, or if you're going to bill egregious charges that are way out of the norm, then the chances of you winning an arbitration are pretty limited. And so the baseball-style arbitration is intended to bring both parties together to resolve the issue, because the farther you are away from what is a reasonable reimbursement, a reasonable bill charge, the less likely you are to win an arbitration. So I think we've addressed it where both of the bad actors, both those that are building egregious charges to patients, and both insurance companies that may lowball reimbursement are going to be penalized through this baseball-style arbitration, and that's why we drew it up that way. You know, one of the things that you see in legislation is that the lobby and the government affairs of individuals that work down there can apply a lot of pressure. But what we did in this bill is we just got the members in a room. And so there were no lobby in the room, there were simply members in the room, and members that have worked on this for a long time. We had Dr. Oliverson, you know, a physician that was well versed in it. Senator John Whitmire was in the room, and then Trey Martinez Fisher, who initially was a joint author with me in the House when we passed the first balanced bill. And so what we did is we took the lobby out and we brought in legislators and literally sat in a table with our staff around us and took pieces of this one and pieces of that one, and we built this legislation across party lines, Senate and the House. And when you walk out of that room and you have that type of support, broad range of support, and you have a physician carrying the same bill in the House, it's really hard to oppose that piece of legislation just because of the way it was put together. It was members doing their job, looking out for their constituents, both Republicans and Democrats. So, you know, the way legislation should be drafted.
You can read more about Senator Hancock's bill on KVUE.com.